Hello, I'm Bill Monroe, and welcome to episode 117 of 2-Minute Talk Tips, the podcast that opens with a practical public speaking tip in the first 2 minutes before getting into a deeper discussion about public speaking. Today's tip comes to us from special guest Kim Baillie.
I have an exercise that I like to do, and it's about controlling your voice, because if you can control your voice, your presentation will flow much better. So it's a physical exercise. So I'm going to do it while I'm talking you through it. So you sit or you stand and you put your hands horizontally across your chest, across your rib cage, till the longest fingers meet. And then you breathe in so that the fingers separate, and then out to bring them together again. And you do that 5 times. And if you keep doing that, and it's just a little exercise, you can do it whenever you like. You do that half a dozen times a day, that breathing pattern will begin to be second nature to you, and the breathing pattern will then help you with your nerves before a performance, and that breathing will also make sure that your voice comes from your chest rather than do the shoulder breathing, which makes us nervous and makes our voices go higher.
Excellent.
So did you try it, Bill? Did you try it while I was saying it?
I did. Really forces you to use the diaphragm to do that deep breathing and, sort of overall expand your capacity, get more oxygen into your system. More oxygen in your system helps your brain, helps everything else.
Helps everything else. And it's the actual breathing pattern that you start to learn. So you don't always have to put your hands there, but you remember that you've got to breathe that way. And then longer term, if you were looking at the speech itself, and you needed to put pauses in your speech to stop using your connector words or whatever else it might be, then you fall back on that breathing pattern. So it becomes the tool that you use throughout your speech, not just at the beginning.
Stick around, and after the break, we'll hear more from Kim Baillie. Welcome back. Kim Baillie fell into public speaking like many of us do by, simply not hating it. In many fields, being willing to speak means that colleagues and coworkers will ask us to speak for the group whenever possible, simply because the idea of doing it terrifies them. Kim lives in Australia, where she acquired her 30 years of experience coaching engineers, architects, senior executives, and now floral designers in public speaking. Her focus is combining their expert knowledge with practical tips to increase their impact as presenters of information. Kim also co-hosts the Inside Exec podcast with Fuliana Osborne, a former Citigroup executive and wealth management expert. Together, they help today's corporate executives learn from managers outside the traditional corporate world. So now, let's meet Kim. So Kim, thank you so much for joining us here on 2-Minute Talk Tips this week.
My pleasure, Bill. It's a delight to be able to share the word, so to speak.
Awesome. And I love this international presence. I love that technology lets me talk to somebody on the other side of the planet and share that with the broader community. It's
really exciting. I know that in my work that I do with people who I'm coaching, it is just such a boon to be able to talk to them in their time and where they're comfortable, and it just means that communication happens and learning happens, which is what it's all about.
Absolutely. So, before we get into everything you're doing today, let's get back to where it started. And what was your earliest memory of speaking to an audience or in front of a group of folks?
I have a very vivid memory. It is when I was 13 and I was asked by the high school. Now, our schooling system is a little bit different. So high school for us is from when we are 12 to when we're 18. So this is when I was 13. So I was in my second year of high school, and I was asked to give the introductory or welcome speech to the new, what we call first formers that were coming through to start their high school education. And it's memorable for me because it was the first time that I learned how important it was to pause in your speeches. And I learned that by a real problem that I had. I had practiced the speech. I had written it out. I knew it off by heart. I got up in front of that hall of people. So we're talking probably 1,500 people with the students and the parents that were there. And I looked out at the sea of faces and I thought, I have no idea what I'm supposed to say. And I don't think that's unusual. I know I come across it in the people that I'm coaching, that they practice and they get ready, and then when the moment comes, the atmosphere hits them, the room hits them, things that they haven't thought about, all of that starts to conflict with what they've remembered or what they've prepared. So I did what I now advise everyone else to do, and I just read a sentence at a time. And what to me felt like huge pauses in between each sentence to the audience was so warming and so welcoming and so engaging that I actually won an award for it. And I was just flabbergasted when I got the award, because I thought it was dreadful. I didn't remember it. I had to read it, but nobody knew that. And this is something that we all need to remember when we're presenting. How we feel is nowhere near as important as the message that you're getting out. And that's my big message for people when they're getting nervous, when they're getting worried. It's about, doesn't matter how you feel, doesn't matter what you think. It's the message that's important. So if you focus on the message and think about the message and make sure that the message is getting out to your audience, then the nerves are going to be secondary to anything else that you're doing.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It is about the message. Ultimately, it's not about you as the speaker. And that makes it so much easier when you get to the point where you can accept that, it's not about me. It's about my audience. It's about the story I'm trying to tell. It's about the action I'm trying to inspire.
It is indeed. And all of that comes in your preparation. If you prepare properly for whatever sort of presentation you're giving, if you start to think about the audience, and if you're focused when you're preparing your presentation on the audience, on who will be there, on why they'll be there, and why you're doing the presentation for them, then it turns around that focus on you and instead focuses on the people that are going to be there and on the message that you need to get across to them or the action that you want them to take.
And I think the other thing that comes out of your story there is that you have an entirely different perception of how it went than how your audience went. When we as speakers make a mistake, the audience generally never even notices.
Wouldn't have a clue. And if I jump forward, say, 30 years to, we have a local, I live in a regional area of Australia, and so we have a local competition that is for young women who are wanting to move out of the regional areas and get a job in the cities. And so one of the things that they have to do is make a speech about a topic, and it's 2 minutes long. It's not very long in speaking terms, but it always seems very long to them.
Right.
And I had every year, it happens every year, so I had a group that came through, and the one that was the most outstanding speaker, when she got off the stage, said to us, "Did you see my knees knocking? I could feel them knocking the whole time." And we thought, no, nobody noticed. All we were doing was listening to what you were saying. And so it just gets reinforced all through my career, is that absolutely how you feel as the presenter, as the speaker, has got nothing to do with how the message is received.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So from that time when you were 13 to going into this career, when did you decide that speaking was something you enjoyed, or did you always enjoy it once you won that award?
I always enjoyed, I guess, because from that very first exercise, I got a reward. I won a prize. And so that made me feel, as a young teenager, that made me feel like, well, here's something that I might be good at. Here's something I can do. So that was really good grounding for me to be able to think about it. But I didn't really pursue it other than I did a little bit of school debating. Mm-hmm. Then I trained as an architect and went into the government service because that was the only place in the 70s that a woman could go and get a job. Then as a result of that, I guess the presentations that we had to do, the the rest of the team deferred to me because they felt that I was a better speaker. And so that almost undisciplined practice led me to being earmarked for a training role in that organisation to train the others. And so that's really when it started, when the management said, look, you're really good at it, everyone trusts you, they like the way you speak, how about you impart that to everyone else? And so start with your team, which we worked in multifunction teams, so there was engineers and quantity surveyors and drafting people in the teams, and it really just progressed from there. And for probably 20 years within organisations, and then I went out on my own, and I've been consulting since the early 90s. And, it's 50 years this year since I made my first speech, so I'm doing all right.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Land on something nice and early and managed to follow that through as everything else went on and your career developed.
It's interesting too when I talk to people about what their presentation is that they've come to me to practice or to learn about, and I honestly find that the bigger the crowd, the more comfortable I am, because I can't focus on any one person and I don't feel like I'm needing to get feedback from any small group. So I like a big group, and that's usually contrary to anyone that I'm coaching. So this is really hard because I'm going to have to visualise that there's this massive audience out there listening, and it's not just me looking at the screen pretending I'm talking to you. I will say that I'm throwing my hands around, so I'm actually doing a bit of a presentation as we speak.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I find myself doing that a lot as well. The other thing that happens is as soon as I start talking on this show, unless I'm specifically on my notes, I tend to close my eyes as I'm doing this, and it's just sort of reflexes start to sort of imagine that connection to that broader audience.
Yes, yeah, it's good. It's good. I know I am involved in another podcast that is more about management skills and senior managers, and we often will do our recordings via Zoom, but sometimes we'll meet face to face, and when we meet face to face, it's like, oh, where do we start? Where do we look? Because we can't actually look at one another in the same room because we're just not used to doing it.
Right. Oh, yeah, and that's the other thing. You talk about crowd size too. I think in my experience, the biggest crowds are the ones between about 50 and 100 people. Because once you get above 100 people, then it's a much more anonymous group that usually you can't see most of the audience anyway.
That's true. That's very true. But I still enjoy the big groups because to me, it's an opportunity for many more people to hear the message that I've got to send out. So I just like big groups. The little groups still make me nervous. 50 years later, I still get nervous. And I guess that's probably something else that we need to highlight is that, yes, you will get nervous, and there are ways that you can manage the symptoms of your nervousness, but never think that they will go away. Because unless you care about what you are talking about or the message that you're imparting or the presentation that you're giving, if you don't care about it, you won't get nervous. But if you care about it, you will get nervous to some extent, or you will show symptoms of nervousness. And it's just about recognising the symptoms, looking at how you can deal with them, looking at how other people deal with them. There's loads of people out there who do lots of public presentations, and to a man, I would say they get nervous. If you ask them, they would say, yes, I still get nervous.
So how do you manage the nerves?
I do an exercise before I go out onto a presentation that is about warming up my voice. And because it's a stupid exercise in that you just make sounds, you make ridiculous sounds with your voice. And it just, for me, that works. It really warms up my voice. And so what that is a trigger for me to say, you're going out on stage, you've got to start speaking, focus on the audience, remember what it is that you want them to do, what you want them to hear. And as I'm doing that vocal warming up, I'm actually switching off from all of the other things in my head, like what are we having for dinner and what time am I supposed to be at this next place? And I'm actually turning all that aside, closing those doors and focusing on where I'm going and what I'm going to say. And that it's just over the years that physical making these noises is the trigger for me.
It sounds almost like a meditation.
I guess it is in a way. It's although the noises are very peculiar. You do a woo woo and a ah. They sound like crows and things. But for me, that works really well in terms of warming up my voice so that it's not strained when I first go out. Because if it was strained when I first went out, then I would worry about how I'm sounding, and then the nerves would build on that anxiety. So I've got to do things that move my concern away from me and onto making sure that the message gets out.
Right. Absolutely, because again, it's all about the message and not about the speaker.
It is.
And it's one of those things too, where I know on the Manager Tools podcast that I listen to a lot, they have a habit of saying, if it's stupid and it works, it's not stupid.
Yeah, stupid is a value judgment. If it works, it works.
Exactly. So you came up working with the architects and the engineers and got into speaking really in part because no one else really wanted to do it or was good at it.
No, absolutely no one else wanted to do it. And as soon as they found someone who would do it and wasn't adverse to the idea of doing it every time, then they were happy.
So, I mean, what are the biggest challenges those folks face when they are forced to do public speaking? Why did they struggle with it?
I guess the issue for me always seemed to be about the information that they had to impart. These were people who were very specialised in what they did, and though they had specialist information that they thought they needed to impart, they weren't imparting it to an audience with the same level of knowledge. And so it was about recognising and focusing on the audience. We go back to these same principles all the time. Think about the audience. Think about what it is they need to know from you. And so at a basic level, they don't need to know all of the statistics. They don't need to know all the numbers. They don't need to know how many hours it's going to take. They need to know in their terms the information that is important for them to make the next lot of decisions or for them to hand over the money, whatever it is. That if you focus on what it is they need to know and then refer that back to all of the information you've got to start sifting through. And that was the hardest thing, I guess, and still is with people that I coach, is them feeling that if they don't tell the audience everything, the audience won't think that they're the expert.
There's a level of ego about it and a level of both ego and self-consciousness about it at the same time.
Yeah, and self-confidence as well. It's about the professional standing, and I think that for the most part with my people I can show them that the reason that they're talking, the reason that they are imparting this information or giving this presentation is because they've already been acknowledged as the expert. They are the subject matter expert in whatever it is that they're doing. And so take that on board. Okay, you've been asked to do it, and the reason you've been asked is because you're the one that's got all the information. You're the expert. Take that, live with that, don't think about it again. Now we'll focus on the message.
So are they generally receptive to coaching when you're coaching them, and to the input and suggestions you're giving, or do you find a lot of engineers and architects and other folks are really resistant at first?
They're not in and of itself resistant. What they're resistant to is comes back to this feeling that they won't do it well enough, that they want to be outstanding right from the word go, and for the most part, it's a progression of learning. It's a progression of the skills development. So when I'm looking at someone new that doesn't know my techniques, I will offer them what's called the boot camp. So they just get one session, 90 minutes. Let's see how far we can get in 90 minutes. And what we do in that time is we explore how best they can learn, because sometimes it's not best to learn from me talking at them. Sometimes it's better for them to watch a video of me or to listen to me, because I've got some recordings as well, and let them develop in their own time. So we look at how best it is that they are going to learn. And once we've established that, then we can go on to the actual public presentation, the speaking side of things.
Yeah, you've got to set those ground rules and understand the structure of what's happening, and then you can build on that and really know what you're working with.
Yeah. And sometimes all they want is help with one presentation. They know they're never going to do it again, but it's just this one presentation that they have to do. So we'll focus very much on what that is. We'll look at that and say, okay, you've got to do this presentation to the council to get approval for a development that you want to do. Who's going to be there? Who are the decision makers? What is it that they need to know to make the decisions? And only focus the presentation on those things. And the more you focus on those things, the more they'll listen to you, and the less they'll feel like you're just there presenting this stuff that will make their eyes glaze over, and they're still got to read something to glean the information that they need to make a decision.
So I think that's really interesting in that you talk about those situations and being able to take that more tactical approach rather than building up their core skills. That sort of gets to what you were talking about earlier, where they often feel the need to go ahead and share everything they know and really go into the details. And I think sometimes as speaking coaches, folks who help other folks with their speaking, we sometimes may go with folks and let's look at all the details. This is what you're going to have to do. This is what is involved in all this crafting, all this prep work, and all this stage presence and putting all this together. But if somebody's only going to be doing this once, they don't need the rest of that body to be a great public speaker. They need to deliver a good talk one time.
That's right. That's exactly right. And so my initial offering is we do this 90 minutes. We see what it is and where we need to go, and I let them decide at the end of the 90 minutes whether they want more, whether they want to just have a look at a couple more videos, whether they want to listen to some of the recordings I've done, or whether they want more sessions with me. And what I've found with that group of people who are doing just the one presentation is that they will do all of those things, but mostly they'll look at the videos, and so they get a sense of knowing me a bit better than the 90 minutes allows. And once they feel that they know me and they can trust me and they've talked to whoever it is that's referred them to me, again, they'll come back and they'll say, oh, maybe I'll have another 1 or 2 sessions just to be comfortable. And so I probably would get to a point where if it was only a single presentation that they're doing, but if I've seen them 3 times, I will say to them, this is enough. You should be able to do this on your own now. Right. So you're also working with floral designers, and that seems like it would be a very different group from the engineers and the architects and the folks who are building stuff, because the added artistic sense and just it is, and it's a passion of mine. I guess it came from my design years early on, and I wanted to have something that was an outlet that was completely different to anything else I was doing, and it's a real challenge. I do enjoy it, but what appeared to me over the years was that there were people who were doing demonstrations, who were showing how to do floral design, who were incredibly outstanding at what they're doing. And they're showing you how to put a design together up on a stage. And some of these people draw 200, 300 people into an audience.
Wow.
But they couldn't talk. They couldn't talk at the same time as they were doing the flowers, because they were designers. They were so focused on the flowers. These demonstrations would go for 90 minutes, and they might say maybe 24 words in that time. And it was just like, put the flower here. Now here it is, it's finished. And I thought, you're really not imparting, certainly we can see what you're doing, but you're not imparting any joy of this activity, any enthusiasm. We're not learning anything by being here other than hoping that we can watch, and as time went on, we can video what you're doing so that we can remember it for next time. So in the course of my own group here doing it, I started to offer some of them some feedback on their presentations. And initially it was about nerves, because they were getting very nervous about going up in front of their peers and presenting a floral design that would always be a good design, but people in the audience might think, oh, well, I wouldn't put that flower there, or I wouldn't have used that, I would have done this or that. And so there was a level of critiquing, because a lot of in the audience were judges as well, and they're international judges. Just as an aside, we have a world championship every 3 years. It was in Boston in 2010. It was in Dublin in 2014. It was in Barbados in 2017, and the next one is in 2020 in Jaipur in India.
Wow.
I went to Dublin and I went to Barbados, and in Barbados I did the Australian exhibit, and I got a commendation for my competition entry. So
fantastic.
I'm pumped in this arena. But what that does, those international events, there are others in the intervening years.
Mm-hmm.
What that does is give me an opportunity to network with these people and to talk to them about their presentations and about how they could improve imparting the knowledge, because a lot of them do it because they want to share what they're doing. They want to share the techniques that they're using and the way that they can put flowers from different countries and plant material from different countries together and make a different kind of display. And so it's exciting in that sense. It's very different to the other stuff, to the professional engineering side of things, but there's engineering to it as well. Sure. Because some of the designs need a bit of engineering to hold them together.
Yeah, you don't want them falling over.
No.
At least not unintentionally.
No, not till after the judges have gone past.
Right.
So what I find with this group is that we have to focus a little bit on the nerves initially, but it's more about them being able to physically do something and talk at the same time. And that's not something that I have needed to look at teaching someone until I took on this group. So for me, it's been a learning experience as well, because I've had to readjust some of the things that I talk about and some of the exercises that I do with these people so that they could actually do that. And because I'm a competitor as well, and because I'm a demonstrator of floral design as well, I understand how difficult that can be. So this know, trust and like you happens differently because they already know me.
Right.
But they trust me because I am, like them, a competitor and a designer and a presenter. And so then they either like me or they don't. And if they don't like me, they'll still learn from me.
Right. Well, there's a couple of a few really interesting things there. First of all, the fact that you are also a competitor, that instantly gives you credibility with the group, and so they're going to make you be able to listen more effectively than just a random trainer. The other thing I think a lot of folks don't realize is that when you talk about how difficult it is to do something while you're speaking, that's very hard, especially with some intricate work like that. You know, everything from as basic of just the time it takes from your eyes to refocus from what's happening in your hands to looking out to the audience. And that time, that takes cognitive load to process that change, to make that happen, then to go back and forth. And then on top of that, I imagine a lot of these folks who are trying to explain what they're doing and why they're doing it have never had to articulate that before. It's until you start speaking about it and training about it extensively, you don't necessarily know why you do what you do.
No, and often the words that you're used to saying in your head, and this applies across the board. This is something that I've had all through my career of coaching, is that sometimes the words that we use in our head or we write down on a bit of paper, we can't actually say. We can't get it, physically can't get it out. And I've had people who stumbled over the simplest of words, and in the end we've had to say, you're going to have to use a different word because you're just not going to be able to get that out, and people are going to focus on that and not on everything else that you're saying, because they won't understand why you couldn't say that simple word. And it doesn't matter why you can't do it, but you can't. So let's just practice doing something else. The other thing that I think helped was the that just before I went into talking to these floral designers, the age of PowerPoint arrived. And I am a PowerPoint is banned from presentations person. So I think if you can't get your message across with words, then PowerPoint is not going to help you. But what happened in that PowerPoint era was that people talked at the machine, or they talked at the screen. So when I transposed that negative activity into the floral designing work, they do the same thing. They talk to the design instead of talking to the audience. So because they're focused on what they're doing, they're talking at the design that's in front of them rather than out to the people who are there waiting for every little bit of information that they're going to impart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is definitely a big deal when you're doing that. And again, we talked in the very beginning, it's all about the audience. And even when you're doing, working with that design right in front of you, it still has to be all about the audience.
Yeah.
The other
a lot of these current subjects, coaching subjects that I have are from non-English speaking background. The biggest issue they have is with grammar. And it is quite common for them to say to me that if I don't get the grammar right, people will think I'm stupid. It's not something that I'd ever considered before, but that's definitely the feeling that they have. If they don't get the grammar right, so the tense of what they're saying, or some of the words where they're using him and his and the pronouns, that sort of thing, if they don't get that right, they will feel that the audience will think that they're stupid, because they don't know that sort of basic level of language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's really interesting when you start talking about words and language, and even as you were saying before, with folks who just have trouble pronouncing a word, sometimes it's the way a series of words that look good on paper just don't roll off the tongue the right way. And now let's factor in a separate language on top of it, and with a fundamentally different grammatical structure, so that even if you can think about what you want to say in your own language and then you can translate the vocabulary, you've still got a separate step to get the words in the quote-unquote correct order.
Yeah.
While you're doing the design work,
yes,
while you're working with probably sharp items on your table and trying to look at the audience, that is a huge amount of stuff to do at once.
I know. We like to be martyrs. We go for the injury. If you get an injury, then the audience is with you. So the sharp objects follow.
So, beyond working with these individual clients, you also have your own podcast. So, you mentioned this earlier. Can you tell us a little bit more about this show?
So, one of my long-time associates, for 30 plus years, we've been working together on and off, was a very, very accomplished senior manager, a CEO with a lot of international organisations, and she left that to have a quieter life, she said. But I thought that she had a lot of information that she could impart about management and management situations, case studies, skills, all that sort of thing. She's not technologically adept, and she's always saying that she would really like to be better at it, but she doesn't really want to learn. So I thought, well, here's my challenge. We're going to do a podcast, you and I. And it was like, oh, yes, well, we'll talk about it for a few. And we did. We talked about it for 2 years before I actually said, no, we're actually starting the podcast this week. And we're doing it. So we've been doing it for 2.5 years. And it goes out weekly. And it basically is designed for senior executives or those looking to move into the senior ranks. And we just talk about our experience in terms of team leadership, of management, of situation management, of education and learning. And we do some case studies and we have some guests on. And the guests we have, we'll generally try and make it so that they're not senior managers in a corporate sense themselves. So we've had on people who come from the community sector, from non-government organisations, from charities, who are managers, but not in the sense that we would expect most of our audience to be. We've had entrepreneurs, and we've had sole traders, we've had triathletes. So just across the board, looking young and old. We've had, I think the youngest guest we had was 27, and the oldest one is 73.
Mm.
So it's given us a real range of information, and what we find from all of these people that we talk to is that their experiences in whatever field it is will often be mirrored in a business sense. So we can learn from everyone, and particularly learn from other industries and other activities about situations that we might come across ourselves.
Right, and that's a great way to bring in those other perspectives, so it's not just talking to the folks down the hall.
Yeah.
That is great. And that's one of those things about management, too. Management isn't just about being the boss and telling people what to do. There's an actual skill to working with people and getting the results that you want that isn't just about giving orders.
Very much so. And it's about being able to communicate. And so our bottom line always is communication, and how you can do that in all sorts of ways, and how it can be destructive if it's not done the right way, or if it's done in a less professional way than it should be, or if you rely on second-hand communications, all those sorts of things. So it comes back to communication always, and what we feel would be the best activities for people to take on, or things they should read, or things they should listen to. So we cover quite a broad range of activities, and it's always good because when I go to Sydney to record, because I'm out of the metropolitan area, she always takes me to lunch, so it's a bonus.
Hey, there you go. So what's been the biggest surprise from the show?
We interviewed a young couple who are triathletes here in Australia, and they were on their way to a World Championships in Hawaii, the ones that happen in Kona.
Mm-hmm.
And that episode, we've had them on twice since, because that episode was the most popular, the one that got the most responses, the one that triggered the most subjects for us to cover in future podcasts. And we really were surprised because they're a young couple. They weren't particularly adept at speaking about themselves. They were just there for a chat, and so they sounded like they were. And maybe that resonated with lots of people, that they were young, but they were absolutely focused. And what was interesting, I think, the thing that's come out of it that has repeated each time we've had them is about doing comparisons, setting goals and doing comparisons, and so that they don't compare themselves to anyone else. Their actual results in races don't matter to them so long as they've had a personal best, or they've improved their time, or they've reached the targets that they set for that particular race. And we talked about that in terms of work, and how we will often, in a corporate environment, we'll think, oh, that person's doing better than me, or they got promoted before me, or they're not doing the job the way I think it should be done. And we're constantly comparing ourselves to others, whereas their message was set the goals for you, because you're the one that has to carry them out, and you should be the one that benefits from the fact that you've set those goals. So it was an interesting progression of ideas that has continued on.
Well, that is awesome, because what I like about that is that's the idea that if it's all about comparing yourself to others, in order for you to be successful, somebody else has to be a failure, and that doesn't promote teamwork or effective corporate behavior.
No.
So Kim, if folks want to know more about you and what you're up to, where should they go?
So probably the best place is the website, talkinginpublic.com. That has the videos and recordings and some downloadable stuff. There's also the podcast, the management podcast is insideexec.com. So I know Bill will put the links at the bottom of the page.
Absolutely. Those will all be in the show notes.
I'm on LinkedIn.
So, Kim, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us this week.
My pleasure, Bill. It's been great talking to you.
Kim's focus on the needs of the audience is, well, it's powerful. She coaches speakers to give the audience just what they need to make their next decision. There's no need to overwhelm them with data and facts that aren't really going to help them, just to make yourself feel better. I also like that she takes a similar practical approach with her students. Those who want to become better speakers can continue to learn from her to improve and become the best speakers they can be. Other students who simply want to give a single good talk can learn how without committing to a long-term program. So check out Kim's site, talkinginpublic.com, to learn more about her programs. Or explore Kim's podcast, Inside Exec, in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to share this episode with a friend, colleague, or relative by giving them the link, 2minutetalktips.com/Kim. And of course, as always, don't get best, get better. Thanks a lot. I'm Bill Monroe, and I'll talk to you next week.
Two-Minute Talk Tips is a proud production of the Currently Speaking Podcast Network.